I'm pleased now to introduce the Vice Chairman of SVA's Board of Trustees, Michael Halsband, who will introduce this year's commencement speaker, the acclaimed artist and SVA alumnus, KAWS.
Thank you, Chris. Hello, I am Michael Halsband, as Chris just said, and I'm the Vice Chair of the college's Board of Trustees, an SVA alum, like you are about to become, and after a long career, I teach here. I'm here to welcome you to our wonderful family and to introduce our commencement speaker, a family member himself who hardly needs an introduction. 30 years ago, Brian Donnelly, now known internationally as KAWS, walked across the stage with SVA class of 1996 and walked out into New York City. Over those 3 decades since, KAWS remade and repurposed bus stops, telephone advertising, then created his own tribe of cartoon characters, at once unique and universal, accessible and mysterious, as dolls, as jeweled creatures, and as giant sculptures, including one right now on the roof of the San Francisco Museum of Contemporary Art, announcing that the rest of the family is inside the museum. From his base in Brooklyn, KAWS has managed to bridge the worlds of art, pop culture, and commerce with Uniqlo, and with the House of Dior, with Air Jordan, and with the General Mills Monster cereals, with Comme des Garçons, and with Fortnite, all while steadily building a powerful presence in art museums around the world. Among them, the Brooklyn Museum, the Art Gallery of Ontario, the Serpentine Gallery in London, the Mori Arts Center in Tokyo, and the National Gallery of Victoria in Australia. What a remarkable path. Please join me in welcoming our commencement speaker, KAWS.
Thank you, Michael, for the kind words. Hi, everyone. President Rhodes, SVA Board of Trustees, I appreciate you inviting me for this opportunity. When SVA asked me to deliver this commencement address, I don't think they realized it was on the 30th anniversary of my own graduation. Ever since they approached me, I've been trying to piece together the details of that day, the gowns, the diplomas, the commencement speaker. I started at SVA in 1992, commuting every day on the PATH train to 23rd and 6th Avenue. Growing up in Jersey City, I didn't know anyone who made a living in the arts. The transition from high school, which had no art classes, to SVA, where everyone was completely focused on art, was mind-blowing. Suddenly, I was surrounded by all these professionals, all these experts whose job was to answer my questions. I remember 2 painting teachers in particular, Steve Assell and Marvin Madelson. They were polar opposites. In Steve's life painting class, I'd be standing there creating an absolute mess on my Masonite panel, and he'd walk up and take the brush out of my hand. While still talking to me, he would dip the brush in my muddy palette and quickly knock in a few details on my painting. Suddenly, my mess would be a human figure with genuine form. It was incredible. As he handed back the brush, he'd say, "You can keep working over this, or you can start a new one." Like most students, I would take the panel and put it in my box and keep it. I still have one I cherish. Marvin Madelson was more meticulous. Some of you may have taken his class. He breaks down oil painting in a way that makes so much sense. You suddenly become aware of what you're actually looking at instead of what your mind is telling you. He made me understand you and value how to push and pull imagery. Even though I don't paint in oil anymore, those fundamentals still shape how I bring a picture together. Students used to joke that Marvin would turn you into a machine or a robot, but really he was teaching you what makes a good picture. which is a combination of understanding and taste. That's something you can never get from a machine. Another thing you'll never get from a machine is community. When I arrived, sva already had a long history of graffiti writers, and my year was no different. As soon as I arrived at sva, that's who I gravitated towards. To be honest, graffiti kept me out of trouble during those years. I approached graffiti with a disciplined mindset, combining what I learned from other graffiti artists with what I was learning in class. I like to think I was a pretty focused student when I was here, but nights and weekends were dedicated to painting outdoors. Sometimes we spent a whole weekend painting a wall in Washington Heights of the Bronx. There were certain writers who had permission to paint walls, and you'd find yourself there with 7 or 8 people painting for 2 days straight. Community is important for making art, and for everything, really. On one hand, being an artist can be very isolating. Depending on your medium, all those solitary hours in the studio or the dark room. On the other hand, art expands your life with these incredible moments of generosity and openness. Organizing group shows, trading artwork with friends, encouraging each other, and friendly competition. In the arts, the landscape is constantly shifting. What goes up always comes down. And it's important to be there for each other, regardless of which direction your life is heading. Partly because it's scary out there, but mostly because mutual support is what creates a world where your work can live. Okay, what else do I remember about my sva days? I remember being sick to my stomach in the weeks leading up to graduation. I had no idea what I was going to do after school, and my anxiety level was on 10. Thankfully, a classmate who had graduated a year earlier introduced me to some people who he was working with in animation, and I was able to find work. One thing I don't remember, if I'm being completely honest, is my graduation day. None of it. Not any piece of advice the commencement speaker gave. I don't even remember who the commencement speaker was. I'm sure he or she was great and said something inspiring, but I have no memory of it, which is what makes me feel comfortable coming here today to talk to you. So this is the part of my speech where I say, when the world gives you an opportunity, don't pass it up. You know that inner drive you've got, the one that makes you want to make art? You need to keep it alive. And that means feeding it when it's hungry. Caring for that drive is not always fun, but it's important to check in with it. Because that's what's going to sustain you through the hard times. Like when you're feeling left behind, you see your friends getting opportunities, or when a director or an art director comes to your studio and is just not interested in what you're doing. Those moments can be hard, but they're also important. They give you time to think about the work and gear yourself up for the next opportunity. Also, the great thing about art is that it's a long game. You don't age out of it. I have older friends, artists in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, who are crushing it. You should approach everything you make like it's going to follow you around forever, because it will. I'm not saying let your perfectionism keep you from finishing anything, because there's a time and a place where you have to let something go. Just make sure what you're putting out there is the best version of yourself at that moment. In the years right after graduation, there were things that really wanted to happen that just didn't. But those disappointments often left the door open for something a lot better. You might feel horrible in the moment, but with a little hindsight, it will all make a lot more sense. I know you all are graduating into a world of uncertainty. We're all living through a moment where everything is getting shaken up and called into question. At moments like this, new voices are more valuable than ever. An artist's job is to will things into existence. You have the power to see the world as it is and how it could be. The path to getting there might not be a straight line, but sometimes it helps to look back at the history of art and all the forms and remind yourself that even the most famous artists have their highs and lows, their twists and turns. Some of them didn't live long enough to see their art change the world, but their legacy outlives them. So today, just remember, have confidence in your vision, build a community for your work, nurture your creative impulses, learn from the past, and most important of all, make the future that you want to see. I'm honored to be here today to congratulate the class of 2026. Thank you.